Hello, I am a senior pre-health professions coach with the Health Professions Office here at the University of Texas at Austin. And I'm going to be going over interview preparation for you today to cover a couple of topics that typically come up in our interview prep appointments. But this is not meant to necessarily supplement a one-on-one interview preparation appointment with our office. This is meant to work in collaboration with. However, you will get a lot of really great information from this if you are unable to make a one-on-one interview preparation appointment with our office. So to get started today, I just want to talk a little bit about the purpose of the interview. One of the biggest things that I tell students is that this is not only your opportunity to show the school that you're interested in that you are a quote unquote good fit for them, but it is also your opportunity to evaluate whether or not the school you are interviewing for is a good fit for you. And there's a couple of different aspects of the interview day or the interview process that may allow you to better determine whether or not this is the right kind of school for you as moving forward with your health professions opportunities. But really, the purpose of the interview is an opportunity for the admissions professionals to get to know you better as a person, along with your skills, your knowledge, your qualities, and then also for you to better understand the school and what the school is offering for your potential goals. So what typically happens at one of these interviews? This is usually at least a half-day process. With the rise of hybrid interviews or online interviews, a lot of the interview opportunities might be spread out throughout a week. So for instance, instead of having a half day of an interview program, you might end up having, a day before you have some events, or maybe the week before you have some events. And so this can be split up a little differently, but normally there's some kind of reception or general school presentation that is going to be offered sometime before the interview or on the same day for that presentation. The reception is usually either a reception or an information session or an opportunity for you to, again, hear from some high-ranking professionals from the school to learn a little bit more about the school, as well as typically to learn a little bit more about what to anticipate for the interview process. Sometimes this can be a really great place to ask additional questions that you feel were not completely covered from the information email that you receive regarding your interview. But it is really important that you go into any of these events having completely read and understanding as much as possible the email that will be sent to you to confirm your interview spaces. There's usually a general school presentation, which is a lot of times some kind of a panel that may include students. It may include other offices on campus, such as financial aid or student services. And so it's really your opportunity to get to know the school a little bit better. Again, this is going to help you determine whether or not this is the type of school you want to attend. For hybrid style interviews or online interviews, there might not be a tour associated with it, but a lot of times our schools have been including some kind of a tour opportunity or option later on that you can always take advantage of. But if it is in person, I would anticipate a tour. And because of that, you do want to make sure you're wearing some pretty comfortable shoes for that option. The interviews can be anything from 2 30-minute interviews to 1 hour interviews. Usually they're going to be two traditional style interviews, or there might be some MMIs, which stands for multi-mini interview style interviews. Again, either could be conducted in a one-on-one fashion, could be a panel of multiple interviewers. And there also can even be things such as group interviews or a writing portion that might come up. So just, again, really pay attention to that email that gets sent to you. And a lot of those emails for your confirmation will tell you what type of interview to anticipate and what the schedule will look like. If you do have an in-person option, sometimes lunch can be covered as well. This could either be grab and go, or you may get to dine with faculty and students, depending on the school's program. So some different types of interviews. These are more just words I want you to be aware of in case they pop up in your information. I also don't want you to fear this if you happen to come across it in places like Reddit. But open file versus closed file. So open file is typically where the interviewer will have access to your entire application, or closed file where the interviewer may know little about you or might have very limited access to your file. A lot of times, what I'm hearing from a lot of our schools is that most of the people doing the interviews may not know your metrics. So they might not know your GPA or your MCAT going into the interview. They might have access, though, to your personal statement and your secondary responses. It just depends on the interview. The reason why I say this kind of doesn't matter is because really at the end of the day, all of your responses should be in alignment with your application. So there shouldn't be any fear or concern regarding whether or not you should talk about things that you already put on your application. I hear from a lot of students, they get concerned that, well, I already wrote about this in my personal statement, or I wrote about this in my secondary. Shouldn't I utilize this interview time to talk about something else? No, not technically, just because you do want to be in alignment with what you already said is something that's important to you and how you've already answered the question previously. The interview is your opportunity to kind of, number one, double down, but number two, not to regurgitate what your exact response was, but elaborate a little bit further. Here are some typical qualities that are probably going to be evaluated in a pre-health interview. These are also qualities that will be evaluated through your personal statement, through your essays, through your secondary responses, and through the evaluation that you wrote down and the information that you shared regarding your learned experiences from your activities. And so this is usually what I tell folks is if you relate to any of these qualities, these are the things you want to be thinking about in your preparation that you want to make sure that you're talking about in your interview responses. So whether a question actually asks you, can you tell us about a time when you showed good judgment, right? That's probably not going to be an exact question, but they might come back and say, can you tell us about a time when you needed to make a decision and how did that impact your group's motivation? So, or maybe tell us about a time when you had to make an ethical decision. That's what's going to actually get to what you consider to be good judgment. And so that is the type of question that they're looking for, maybe this quality, but they don't expressly say that. And you want to be thinking about these things regarding, okay, well, this question is asking me this. I want to answer this question. What is a skill or a quality I can highlight while answering this question that stays in alignment with what they just asked? And then hopefully provide an example as well. But the biggest thing about this is I want you to know is that everybody watching this presentation should have some of these qualities. It's okay if you don't have all of these qualities. A large majority of you will have all of these qualities, but you do want to lean into what you feel like your strongest qualities are. So how do you prepare for the interview? I like to say it's a 3-step process. Step one is you do want to know the school. Hopefully you've already taken a lot of these steps leading up to application and or kind of moving through the secondary process. So you do want to make sure that you're researching the schools that you're interested in and that you're applying to. And different ways that you can do that is by going to their website and going to their admissions section, going to their About Us section, going to see if they have a current student section, looking to see what their educational model or curriculum is. And then also for my med students, you can also look at any kind of curriculum directory or any kind of directory for any of my health professions. You can look up to see what is some more information you might need to know about the school. You want to make sure that during this researching process that you're writing down high quality questions that you could potentially utilize in the actual interview process for when that interviewer asks you, do you have any questions for me or for us? Some ideas, if you're getting a little stuck on this, you could look at AAMC's. So this is again the medical website, 35 questions I wish I'd asked. To get ideas of what should you be paying attention to on these websites, or what kind of questions should you be making sure to ask during your interview process, and really critically thinking about what information do you want to know about these schools to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success. Where else can you find information? Facebook, I know it's a little outdated, but it's still there and it can still be helpful. Google, so you can always Google information. Even before AI was a thing, Google was a thing, so you can definitely look up some information there. LinkedIn. LinkedIn is probably my number one option that I feel like is underutilized for a lot of students. I love to use LinkedIn because you can actually look up alumni who have affiliated themselves with their program on the LinkedIn website and look to see what are they doing now. So if you're really looking into being very interested in a certain type of specialty or direction, and that's something that's interesting you in a specific school, I would look into LinkedIn to see not only what are the things that they're promoting regarding opportunities for students, but also what are their students doing now. The news. So again, a little bit of an outdated source, but definitely utilize the news. And what I mean by this is that you can actually look up campus newspapers. You can look up program newspapers. You can look at online websites, blogs, things like that that are affiliated with the program to look to see kind of what is the response or what's kind of happening on the campus. And then also Twitter, or now known as X, that's a really great way to find information to see kind of what's going on and how are certain offices promoting themselves in the school. So why is this research important? We kind of touched on this a little bit already, but it gives you an opportunity to make a list of qualities that you want in a health profession school. And if you do this for all the schools that you're planning to interview with and that you're applying to, it does give you the opportunity to prioritize them and rank them. With that list, you can also, again, go to the school website, see how the school is based on your criteria. So as you're actually researching, you can create this list, or if you already know that there's a list of qualities that you want or are looking for, you can start with that ahead of time before you start your research. And again, this information is going to allow you to create questions for them. And it's going to provide you information to share in response to what do you know about the school, or why are you interested in pursuing this program specifically? A lot of times schools will have similar information, and that's perfectly fine, or similar opportunities, but you do want to be aware of what those opportunities are. And then that way you can explain why that opportunity at that institution is important to you, even if another program offers it. You do just want to make sure that you're aware of it and decide why that's important to you or not important to you. So knowing the profession is step number 2. So this really should have, again, been done through all of your experiences. So part of the application is gaining experience within the profession and within the field. And you can do this through your shadowing, through any type of worker volunteer in a healthcare-based setting. And so you do really want to practice talking about your understanding of the profession based on those experiences that you've already had. Really take some time and reflect on why were certain experiences important to you? What did you learn about the profession, about yourself, about the skills needed to be successful in that profession? And then you want to be able to talk about it, which is why it's important to practice talking about this. You want to make sure that you can demonstrate what you have learned based on your research and your understanding, and then also, again, on those direct experiences. You can also take some extra steps to research current issues in the field. I have some examples of national associations and some news-based organizations that you could look into and just kind of have a current issue on the mind that you could bring up if that happens to come up in conversation or in your interview. And again, this isn't something that you need to be overly knowledgeable about. You don't need to know solutions to this. You're not in the field yet, but this is something to just show awareness of the field so that you can show that your interest has extended into even understanding what are the current issues, what are the current challenges, and also if you can be prepared to discuss why those current issues or those current challenges don't dissuade you from going into the profession and maybe why they interest you even further in pursuing this profession. And step 3, the biggest thing of all, is you want to know yourself. I started this presentation with the information regarding you're going in and you are wanting to communicate to them what are your skills, what is your knowledge, and what is your information that you're sharing about yourself and your experiences that would make you a good fit for their program. So you do want to go over all of your application materials. What information did you put in your activity section? What did you say that you learned or grew from a certain activity? Personal statement, you want to be aware of what did you say in your personal statement. Hopefully it's still in alignment for you. You want to go and review your optional essays and then also all of your secondary applications. Now, the good thing is that for some of you, you may have interviews that are back to back, and that's a little bit more challenging. But for some of you who have interviews that are more spread out, you can kind of bring up your secondary application information as needed, kind of the same thing with your research about a certain institution, and review that kind of on its own instead of having to have all of this information at your fingertips immediately. In addition to discussing why you want to commit to this profession, you also must be able to articulate why you're a good fit for it. So we use that word a lot, fit, so F-I-T, and you want to be able to explain based on your experiences, what skills or qualities have you observed in professionals in this field that you feel like you possess or you want to build on or you feel like are important in order to be a successful person in this field. And so that's what you want to be thinking about is what type of qualities do you possess that are going to make you ready for and successful in this profession that you can discuss with them during an interview process. So it's really, really important that to know yourself, you're taking that time and you're asking yourself really important reflection questions about yourself and really sitting with what are my skills, what are my qualities, and how have my experiences provided examples of when I've been able to utilize those skills and qualities? How have they provided examples of how these skills and qualities are important to this profession or can be used in this profession in a positive way? And also, how are my skills, qualities, and values in alignment with what the school is saying that their values are regarding how they're hoping, what types of professionals they're hoping to make or come out of their school? So we've talked a little bit about the preparation for the researching background. Now I get a lot of questions about how to specifically prepare for certain questions. Though there's not one easy way, you have to find the strategy that works best for you. But the biggest thing that I can say is that you want to be prepared, but not over-rehearsed. And you do want to practice. And part of practicing is not only practice answering questions, but you want to practice just speaking and being comfortable speaking and being comfortable speaking about questions or prompts that are on the spot that you haven't had time to prepare. And what does that look like for you? So do you need to slow down your speaking habits? How comfortable are you speaking in front of a camera for virtual interviews, etc.? A lot of times as well, we're going to recommend that no matter what the question is, you should always be providing an example. And you want to be specific in these examples. And so some questions may prompt you and say, tell me about a time when. Other questions may not. They might just say, how would you respond to this? And so you want to be prepared with examples of times that can kind of back up your statement so that you can show them and not just tell them what your response is. Anything on your application can also draw questions. So again, the person could have access to your personal statement or to your secondary questions. So anything, again, that you put on your application, which is why it's important to know what you put on there and that you shared, could draw follow-up questions. I also want to add that you want to be prepared for what might be perceived as a negative question. You want to make sure that you're honest and that you talk about what you learned from an experience that might have had a negative result or might have originally started in a negative way. And remember that everybody has weaknesses, but it's about how you are working to overcome some of those challenges and weaknesses. And again, what skills and qualities have you put in place to make sure that that weakness or that negative trait is not going to become an issue for others, is kind of how we like to say it. And so what I always like to say about negative questions is, whenever you receive one, you always want to make sure you leave with a positive answer. And that doesn't mean that, you don't lean into the negative portion first. You just want to make sure that you always leave them with a space of, this is how I'm working towards a better resolution. So an example of this, if someone were to ask you, what is a weakness of yours? Or what is something you find challenging in your science-based coursework? Right? You're going to have to find something that is an honest answer. Everybody has a weakness. Everybody finds something challenging. So if you were answering the second question, what's something you find challenging within your science-based coursework? Maybe something that you say is, my science-based coursework can be very technical sometimes. And sometimes I like to stay in the big picture elements, which doesn't always allow for me to see some of the details that I need in order to be successful in my coursework. Because of this, I know that I need to take some extra time for my science-based coursework to make sure that I am outlining appropriately the details to make sure I haven't missed anything before moving into the big picture answer or response. And so ever since I've started doing this, I've seen an increased grade in my science-based courses. And I've also seen a really positive response from my faculty regarding my ability to still understand and see the big picture, but understand how the details are making up that big picture in a more positive way. So we're leaving with a positive there. We acknowledge that we do have a challenge, but we also talked about what are some of the ways that I'm trying to overcome that, and what are some of the skills or tools that I've put in place in order to try to overcome that, and what has the result been. You also want to be prepared for scenarios or questions where maybe you haven't had any experience yet. You want to pull from experiences that you do have that might talk about similar qualities you might need to utilize. And so what do I mean by this? If somebody were to ask you, how would you handle a patient being discriminatory? You might not have ever had a situation where you've had to deal with a patient being discriminatory, or you might have never had an experience where you experienced discrimination personally. But you can also always draw on, if you have seen anybody around you experience that, how did it make you feel? What was something that you wanted to step into or do in order to maybe solve that situation? You can always step into the experiences that you do have. And again, for something like this, it might be communication, it might be, sitting in discomfort. Thinking about situations that are similar to that can help you pull out an answer for something that you haven't experienced yet. All right, so what else can you expect? We usually refer to one of the questions you can always expect is a tell me about yourself question. We do like to call this a rapport building question. This is not a time to answer, why are you interested in going into a medicine? This is not a time to answer, why are you interested in science? This is asking specifically, tell me a little bit about yourself. And so you need to make sure you're answering the question that's asked, not anticipating what they're trying to ask you. So they didn't say, why are you interested in going into medicine? But what you can do here is follow a tip that we have, which is the rule of 3. In your preparation, you can always help yourself by remembering that you probably want to talk about 3 quick things. That's a good way to keep yourself on track, to not overshare or speak too long on any one question or not say enough. And so I would really recommend that for this question, you are using this as an opportunity to connect with your interviewer as a person, and you talk about hobbies, about background experiences of yourself. So where did you grow up? What type of a relationship do you have with your family? Is family important? What are some of your values? And then again, hobbies are really important because you can also tie in elements of yourself as far as why certain hobbies are important. So what I mean by this is maybe you really enjoy running. I don't, but that's okay. And even as an interviewer, I can lean into what is your reasoning why you're interested in running. So if you say, I'm really interested in running, it's something that is able to calm me down before I have a really big day of a lot of busy things happening. And so I really make it a point to go for a 30-minute run every single morning, no matter what, to really get my day started, to help get me focused, and then also do something for myself before my day gets busy. And so I know that no matter how stressful my day gets, I already know that I've done something for myself to take care of myself, and that helps me get through the stress of the day. And one of the reasons why I love that type of answer is because it also helps the interviewer understand how you cope with stress, which is definitely something that a lot of the health professions are going to have to deal with. And so being able to kind of put out there immediately one of your hobbies that's really important to you that you hope to continue even through professional school is something that does help you deal with stress is a good way for them to already know, okay, you already have some kind of coping mechanism in place for if things get stressful. So behavioral style interview questions, these are often what we hear a lot of students experiencing. This is really when that interviewer will say, tell me about a time when, give me an example of any of those types of questions where they're asking you to recall an experience that you've had and what was your behavior during that scenario. And the reason why behavioral style interview questions are popular is because it is kind of assumed that past behavior can predict future behavior. So based on how you responded to previous examples of this, can help them determine how you may respond to, for instance, a group of people. And so one of the ways that we say that you can actually respond to these types of interview questions is using the STAR method. So I have it here on this slide for you. It is situation, task, action, and result. And I actually like to say as well that you can utilize this STAR method to also help you shape some of your responses for MMI style questions as well. So the multi-mini interview style questions where you're typically getting a scenario-based question that you might have to organize your thoughts for. But the situation is just the overview or the setup of what is happening in your example. The task is what is your role and what would you typically be asked to do in this situation? And then what was your actual action based on what was occurring in this situation? So what did you actually do? And be specific. And then what was the result or the outcome of your action? Was it positive? Was it negative? If it was negative, if it wasn't the result that you were hoping for, or it wasn't a good result, would you do something differently next time? Did it teach you something for next time? That's all things that you want to add into these types of examples to respond to these questions. So like I was mentioning, MMI interviews are also a style of interview that you might come into contact with. And so the MMI interviews are really similar to the Duet and Casper and Preview style exams where you are going to be faced typically with a scenario. And a lot of times it'll either be some kind of one-on-one structure where you may just be responding to a scenario to one interviewer, or you may also be doing some kind of scenario-based option where the interviewer is interacting with you and you are actually acting out a type of scenario. A lot of times, these are typically going to be 1 to 3 minutes with some kind of a prompt to set you up for the situation. and then about 6 to 8 minutes of answering the prompts. Again, there's usually 1 to 2 interviewers per station, and they are typically short or structured interviews. This can be either virtual or in person. We've seen a lot of virtual MMIs moving to utilizing software systems where you actually go online or you sign into a certain software system and you will record your responses through that software system and you won't actually interact with an interviewer. Don't be put off by that. Half of the time, even if you were doing this in person or via Zoom, a lot of times the interviewers wouldn't be reacting to you anyway, which is not meaning that you were doing anything wrong. So just be prepared for that as well if you do this in person. The interviewers may have instructions not to engage or to ask you questions. They simply want to hear your response. I like to say this is kind of like the math question, interview question, where if you don't show all of your work, you're not going to get the correct answer. And so MMI interviews are primarily meant to understand your level of thinking and critical thinking and how you have come to a decision based on your experiences, your values, and your decision-making skills. So there really is usually no right or wrong answer per se. They're really more so evaluating how well you're able to communicate why you are hoping to answer the way that you did or what decision you're hoping to make. Again, similar to MMI, even for one-on-one style interviews or traditional style interviews, you might get some ethical questions. Again, they're usually posed in the form of a hypothetical situation, and there's usually no clear right or wrong answer. And the interviewers are also typically evaluating how you developed the framework for your answer, what experiences you draw on, and how your values and beliefs fit into what you're saying. They may also challenge you a little bit to see if they can substantiate your position, or if you change your mind or give in to their view. So they might push back just a little bit, but just know based on the information that they give you, determine they're not necessarily trying to get you to change your answer, but determine whether or not the additional information may cause you to reconsider, and then make sure that you're explaining that. The interviewer may also alter the scenario to evaluate, again, if it would change your mind, and then your ability to take in and synthesize this information and incorporate it into your response is really what they're evaluating. So again, they're not trying to necessarily make you change your mind, but they do also want to test to see, is there some information that you might need to consider that would potentially, based on your values, beliefs, and experiences, make you go a different direction. There is also a group interview option for some different schools. And so group interviews can be a group of 5 to 12 people, usually no more than 12. And they're a lot of times asking you to work on a scenario or find some kind of agreed on solution to a problem. And a lot of times the interviewer is just observing the teamwork and group work while you're coming up with this, and then you kind of present it towards the end. And the biggest thing about group interviews is that you're going to have a lot of folks who are pretty not soft-spoken, so want to definitely stand up in some kind of leadership capacity. And so the biggest thing to remember is you want to make sure that you speak up in these group interviews. And another great way that you can actually show off your skills of observation and also of working together as a group in a collaborative way is if you are mindful of who in the group has not had an opportunity to add their opinion or 2 cents in, you can always make sure to kind of tap them on the shoulder or ask, hey, so-and-so, you haven't been able to speak up yet. Do you have anything else that you want to add, or do you agree with what we've said? Bring some other people into the fold, and that'll always look good for a teamwork style of a position. Nonverbal communication, again, you want to be paying attention to not only what you're saying during your interview, but the other nonverbal communication that you're providing. So making sure to make eye contact that's comfortable for you, avoiding nervous habits. So if you talk with your hands a lot, do a couple of video interviews where you can record yourself to see how that's coming across on camera. Look energized and attentive. And again, you want to smile. You don't want to come across as not enjoying your opportunity to speak with these folks. But again, if it doesn't feel comfortable for you, just be mindful of it. And then you also want to pay attention to your interviewer, watch their facial expressions and follow their tone. Again, humor is a little risky during these interviews. We want to stay in more of a professional tone. And so your interviewer, though, will kind of give you some understanding of where they're coming from, and if whether or not the interview is maybe a little bit more conversational, what you can lean into, but I would rather you stay more on the professional side instead of lean too into comfort with the interviewer, just because it can kind of blur the lines and distract from your great responses. Some dress tips for the interview as well. This is both virtually and in person, as you do want to dress professionally. So either a full suit or at least a blazer and a button-up shirt, and then also some nice dress bottoms. So whether that's some slacks or a skirt. And then hair should be nicely groomed, minimal and reserved jewelry for both, for anybody, just because we don't want anything jangling or shining or catching the light the wrong way. The biggest thing to remember for these interviews is we want to make sure that you are the star of the interview and not something you're wearing or not something that you have on. And we also want to make sure that we're not distracting ourselves or distracting the interviewer. For in-person interviews and also virtual, you want to make sure you're wearing deodorant, but maybe no cologne or perfume, especially for in-person. You don't know who might be sensitive to certain smells. So maybe no cologne perfume, but just a really good deodorant, especially if you have a walking tour and especially if that's in Texas during any of the hot seasons. And then also if you are wearing makeup, just make sure that it's appearing natural. Again, the biggest thing is that we don't want to distract from your responses. And we don't want to distract the interviewer from the great things that you're about to say. What can you bring or have? So depending on the type or style of interview, you may or may not be able to bring a notepad and pen. You should at least have that with you if it's an in-person interview, for instance, for a full day. A lot of times, if you are not allowed to have a notepad and pen for a portion of the interview, they may have a place where you can put your items. But a notepad and pen is really helpful to make sure that you can take notes during any type of presentation that they have, that you can also jot down and evaluate your performance after the interview while it's still fresh. You can jot down some notes where you felt like you were maybe challenged or where you felt like you did really well. And then also make sure that you're capturing the impression of the school. And then you also want to make sure that you have your questions ready. So whether that's with your notepad and pen, the biggest thing is you want to make sure you have your questions for them ready. And again, that they're high quality questions. Do also remember that if any of your questions are answered during the panel or school presentation, that you cross those off of your list and that you're not re-asking them in those spaces, unless you do want a different perspective. So if something was answered earlier, you can always say, hey, the students gave a really great response regarding this question earlier, but I would love your response as a faculty member. That's perfectly fine. And then again, comfortable shoes. So if your interview is in person and you have dress shoes on, you want to make sure that you have some shoes you can either change into or shoes that you're already wearing that are comfortable for a walking tour. So a little bit of logistics for in-person. It's not going to be too different for virtual either, but you want to typically try to arrive the day before so that you can get a good night's rest. So you're not worrying about driving in the same day as your interview. If you're unfamiliar with the location or the area, maybe do a drive-by the day before, or again, plan to arrive very early so you can get comfortable with the space and the location. Give yourself plenty of time in the morning, and please, please, please eat breakfast. Even if you're not a huge breakfast eater, just be mindful of the next time you're going to eat and maybe have some snacks ready. And then arrive at check-in 20 to 25 minutes before the interview time. Stop at the restroom and check your appearance just to make sure that you're comfortable. For virtual, again, you want to get a good night's rest the night before, and then you also want to give yourself plenty of time in the morning as well. So again, make sure to eat breakfast, or again, have some snacks that you can snack on outside of your interview times, not during your interview. And then you do want to make sure that you know that the virtual software that's being used is up to date on your computer and ready to go. You want to make sure that your setup for your video is also ready to go. And then you also want to look at your email again. You should really do this for in-person and virtual as well, but look at your email again to ensure that you know the schedule. Make sure that you're double checking those time zones, whether or not you're in a different time zone or the school is in a different time zone, and also make sure that you have the correct links. Virtual interview tips, I do also want to continue on this a little bit more. I usually recommend utilizing headphones or earbuds. I'm actually not doing that today and it's out of my comfort zone, but I feel like people can hear you better and it does also help to eliminate outside noise. And I do believe typically you can hear the interviewer better as well. It does not matter what types of headphones or earbuds you're using or microphone style that you're using, as long as it's, again, not distracting to the interviewer. So if it is more of a gaming headset, as long as it doesn't have neon lights or stickers or other things all over it, if it is something that is just a plain black, that will be perfectly fine. Have a neutral background or look into some kind of blurring background on Zoom or Teams. And then also remember that if you need some kind of private interview room, you can typically request some type of room from the Texas Career Engagement Center or other areas around campus. Turn off all notifications on your computer. You don't want something popping up that's going to be distracting you. And then you also want to check your internet connection and make sure that your software, again, is updated. So one of the suggestions that I have for you for practicing, at least currently, UT has access to something called Big Interview. And this is a software tool that actually allows you to practice a lot of different types of questions for an interview process by recording yourself through a webcam. They also provide some tips and tools such as the Answer Builder, which can help you go through some of those reflection questions that we were talking about earlier in the presentation to really kind of find those examples and those skills and those qualities that will be shown through some of your examples. And then again, you can record your answers, and occasionally you might be able to receive feedback as well. And so I would definitely use Big Interview. Again, we have this linked on our website under our resources tab for interview preparation. And if you do have a one-on-one meeting with our office, we will provide you the link as well. All right, so next steps for you. Thank you so much for sitting through all of this presentation so far. The biggest thing that I would say is that you want to make sure that you're checking out the HPO website for interview resources. Again, a lot of the things we've talked about today, even examples of questions, are all going to be on our HPO website, and I will have that link up here for you next. But you want to make sure that you are preparing, and again, not over rehearsing. And so you want to research the schools, you want to read up on current issues in your field. And again, you want to practice. You want to practice talking about yourself and think of your experiences, knowledge, and your qualities and skill sets. And a great way to practice is you can practice in front of a mirror. You can utilize those resources like Big Interview to record your responses. You can even do that sometimes through Zoom if you want to. And then I would say sometimes we even recommend giving a list of questions to friends or family and just having them call you randomly when they know that you'll be available and asking you a question without you knowing which question they're going to ask. That's a really good way for you to get used to receiving a question and listening to a question and coming up with a response on the fly. And then also I would definitely recommend, if you have not already, please schedule an interview prep appointment with a health professions coach here at the Health Professions Office, the University of Texas at Austin. This is something that we add to all students who are going through their application cycle. If you have let us know that you are applying, we will have this as an appointment option for you. And so if you do not see this as an option when you're scheduling, just reach out to our office, and I'll have our email on the next slide for you. Just reach out to our office and let us know that you do need this interview prep appointment, and we will definitely make sure that you can get scheduled. We do also strongly suggest that you can utilize any of your coaching appointments to debrief any of your experiences interviewing, especially if it was an unpleasant experience. We definitely want to walk you through that and help you prepare and be even more confident going into the next one. And then that also just makes us aware of the experiences that our students are having so that we can always follow up if necessary. All right, so I want to thank everybody for coming and listening to this presentation today. This was again for interview preparation for health professions, and I do have our health professions information here located on this slide. If you do have any follow-up questions or if you do need any of the resources that we discussed today, I would check out our website or again, reach out to our email if you're having any challenges scheduling an appointment with us.